For me, the only team who can realistically challenge Red Bull's dominance this year is Aston Martin. That might seem obvious after the first 2 races, but I think there is more to it. So let's peel this onion apart and see why Aston Martin are our only hope for another team to usurp Red Bull this year. Which team is the best hope for challenging Red Bull this season? Aston Martin? Do you think Ferrari? Do you think Mercedes? Or do you think other? The consensus, the people's beliefs. Yeah, obviously it's looked good for Aston Martin in these first 2 races. Yeah, Mercedes have consistently been kind of up there. Depends how big this upgrade is that's coming. Ferrari, how much of their woes are fundamental to the car versus like setup, things that they could dial out. 78% of you say Aston Martin. It's clearly Aston Martin. It has to be, right? Multiple reasons. So you've got Lance Stroll, first and foremost, is stepping up, has been relative to Fernando considerably better than I think most of us gave him credit for, like what we expected him to be. It wasn't his fault the car broke down. He could have quite comfortably got a P4, I think, yesterday. There is that distinct jump between Fernando and Lance, but Lance can be there. I think Lance has proven that he can be close enough to support. There was always the question, is that going to be the Achilles heel to this team long term? The fact that Lawrence owns the team is great from a, putting money into it, from hiring the right people. He's clearly done a very good job on that front, but then always having Lance in that seat, is that going to hold them back? And did Barrichello hold Ferrari back when they were winning championships with Schumacher? Did Bottas hold Mercedes back when Lewis Hamilton was winning championships with Mercedes? Having that distinct number 1, 2 driver that they do clearly have at Aston Martin, and I don't think Lawrence is going to be naive to that. He would be silly to be naive to that. He's giving his son a seat. That is enough. He doesn't need to push Lance to be, oh no, I'm going to make sure Lance is number 1 or they're equal with Fernando. No, Fernando is quicker than Lance. That's fair. That's going to happen, right? I don't see Lance out qualifying Fernando many times this year, but that Lance Stroll asset is stronger than most of us gave credit for. What, his 7th, 8th season, whatever it is, 2017 was his first season in F1. He should have improved and he should be at a good level by this stage, 7 years into his career. Then you've got to look at the fact that, okay, the ATR, the aerodynamic regulations, whatever it's called, the way that works, so it's split down the middle of a season. The way the season ended last year, with Aston Martin finishing P7, the ATR allocation that you get from the start of this year, from January until the end of June, Aston Martin have, 100% of the allocation, whereas Red Bull have 62.5%, Mercedes have 80%, Ferrari have 75%. Aston Martin have got not just more than the other teams at the bottom, way more than the other teams around them at the top. The fact that they've got so much more aerodynamic time and testing, and clearly what they're doing is working. The fact they've turned this car around, it's not like a fundamentally flawed philosophy like the Mercedes. You chuck as much ATR time at that as you want, there's a ceiling there that they seem to be pretty close to from everything. Like Toto said, there's a cap, and it seems that these other philosophies, the Red Bull Ferrari one, potentially can go further. We've got all this ATR time, and we know we've got an aerodynamic platform that works already, so we're only going to build on that with the ATR. This is all a product of Fallows. Like, Fallows came from Red Bull. He knew what Red Bull was doing. He knows that direction. He's put them on that same direction. He's not stolen any data, but it's all up here. He knows what Red Bull were trying to do. It's the same ceiling. The Red Bull Aston Martin ceiling is the same ceiling because they're going down the same direction. So if anyone's going to challenge Red Bull, it has to be Aston Martin. Because not only that, you've got Fernando, who's doing bits like, yes, the pit box thing was very silly. Of all the drivers I expected to make a mistake like that, it was not Fernando Alonso. He's literally lined up on a grid in an F1 race more than any single person ever. And there's more races than there's ever been as well. So it's like, you add all that together, and there's no way that Aston Martin aren't the team that are going to take the fight. If anything, right, I don't know, maybe this is a long shot, but the 2% who went other in the poll, McLaren are talking about they're cooking up something big because they got caught out by the floor changes. James Key said that then put the development of their new car back. That's why they missed. They didn't have this Baku car that's come in round 4, apparently. They didn't have this car for the start of the season. Aston Martin have done it. That's the thing, right? You might say, oh, McLaren up the top. Don't be silly. You say that. But Aston Martin did it. Aston Martin literally did it. They were rubbish at the start of last year. They were like 9th, 10th quickest car. Even by the end of the year, they were still, you look at the points, they still scored less than McLaren and less than Alpine by a good amount in the second half of that season. They were closer because you had a few times where they lost out points and they were actually on par with the Alpine and McLaren. But I think you can say they were 6th quickest car in the second half of last year. They're clear of Ferrari, they're clear of Mercedes. These teams aren't infallible. Just because they've got the big name doesn't mean that they can't be overtaken and beaten. Question: who's a bigger challenge to Max Verstappen winning this title this year? Is it Aston Martin or is it Sergio Perez? Thoughts and feelings in the comments below. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.